Alrighty, here we go. My name is Travis Neville. This is the Travis Neville Podcast. I wrote this book called Reviving Masculinity. You can get it anywhere great books are sold, and even some places where bad books are sold. You choose. I got the chance to talk to Anya Shakhmeyster. She runs a podcast called the Venus and Mars Podcast. Her stated mission is to bridge the gap between men and women. And I thought that was a brilliant thing to do. I think that I wanted to see, how do you apply that? What are the bridges? How does it, how do you do it? And then have a meaningful conversation comparing my research and experience to hers from female perspective versus the male perspective. And I think we nailed that. It's great talk. So I'm excited today to present to you Anya Shakmeister from the Mars and Venus podcast. I'll put up her information here and you guys can enjoy her work whenever you get a chance. I hope that in some way this conversation helps you to get your shit together. Have a great week.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent. It's a great
Nice.
day here in Michigan. It's
Oh,
been
good.
warm. It's not winter anymore. How are things in Texas?
Oh, they're warm. They're already warm.
Like ridiculous warm?
No, no, it's still like 60s and stuff, 70s, so it's good. It's gonna be like maybe 3 more weeks till it gets really hot.
How hot does it get?
Like 110 probably.
That sounds terrible.
It's okay. I'm cool with the heat. I'm actually like I prefer the heat over the cold, so I'm good.
I think most people do. I'm one of the rare ones where heat just gets to me, and I work outside a lot, which I love doing, but yeah,
Yeah,
the
I
heat,
can see
I mean,
that.
there's nothing I can do about it, I can throw on a coat when it's cold.
People say that, but man, I get so uncomfortable when I'm cold. I am the biggest baby when I'm cold.
Well, there's not much to you, I'm over 200 pounds. There's a lot more to, I can last longer, right? You
That's true.
can't.
That's so true. That's so true.
So I really was encouraged by and enthused by our phone conversation. I think that we
Great.
can do a lot of the same things just from different directions. I think
Yeah.
that we are we got the same outcome in mind, and that's to bring men and women together. And I think that just so few people are doing that. I think that the ideas that are kind of omnipresent in society right now are divisionary. They're pulling people apart, and it just hurts everyone. So, as a
Yeah.
result of our phone conversation, I wanted to talk about what are some of the specific things that build those bridges between men and women. So I'll
Yeah.
open up by asking you this: I guess, what's the most common mistake that you see? Maybe, and you can answer that however you
Yeah.
want, maybe from a female perspective. But what's the most common thing that's dividing people?
Well, I think, societally, there are a lot of things that are dividing people right
Mhm.
now. Partnership isn't celebrated in the
I
way
agree.
that uh, singleness is being celebrated. And I'm
Mhm.
talking specifically around like profitability and products and consumerism and just how celebrated it is to be single right now and to not
Yeah.
need anyone and to be this
Hmm.
like hyper individualized person. So that's kind of happening on a cultural level. But I also think that we are programmed in a way to not want to speak the language of the opposite sex,
I'd
to not
agree.
want to understand the opposite sex, to feel like they should understand us, but to not want to go and understand them. And I think that's what keeps us at this like very big kind of crossroads, or like it's almost like we're on opposite sides of a river and like we don't have a bridge. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I would tell you that yeah, that rugged independence has been kind of an old standby in the traditional masculinity forever. I mean, from John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, all that
Yeah.
stuff, where you're just this rugged individual. It certainly is still something that's very, very respected among men. And there's this old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. But ultimately, that saying ends with, if you want to go far, go together. And that's
Totally.
the idea that we're trying to get done here. So from the male perspective, for sure, individualism is even celebrated. No, I don't, look how independent I am. Look how self-sufficient, self-reliant I am. I can do everything. It's just been like that for a long time, and I see that like crazy in the on the woman female side now too.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, I think just generally, we in the West, we've never really celebrated femininity. And this is so bad for all of us. It's bad for men, it's bad for women. We've never taken a minute to understand what are the values that femininity brings. And I think because of that, women have been taught to devalue themselves and their own femininity in light
Mm,
of trying to seek to be more like men or be more masculine. And that's screwing it up for all of us because I know men love femininity,
yeah,
but they can't put their finger on what it requires. Women have to do that.
I
And
agree.
so we've got to have this big like revolution around like, let's celebrate this. What is this thing called femininity? So that's kind of been my journey for sure.
Yeah, I would tell you that that's a disconnect. What you just mentioned, that a man knows it when he sees it, so to speak, as far as femininity. And I think that's a disconnect between your frontal cortex and your midbrain. You're thinking logical. You can say, well, it's X, Y, and Z. But, I always say this, like, I always encourage people to make a list of the things that they would like to see in a partner. And,
Yeah.
here's the thing, that 9 out of 10 of those things can walk through the door and it can do nothing for you. You have to be able to have that spark, that fall in loviness, the
Yeah.
ability to do that, and that's because that's not a front brain thing. That's a gut, animalistic, instinctual
Yeah,
midbrain thing, and
totally.
that's the piece that's missing. So a man can't define that. He can just know it when he sees it. And I would guess it's the same for women, the same kind of disconnect. And I think it's harder on women, to tell you the truth, watching from the outside, because there is so much logical, there's so much stuff saying, oh, I need to have a career, I need to have and all these things. And I understand those pressures, and I don't think that those things are necessarily bad, but I think that they are exact opposites of what their midbrain is telling them in so many different ways. I can't tell how many women I meet late 30s, and they're like, I don't want to do this shit anymore. I got a great career. Awesome.
Totally.
It doesn't keep me warm at night. Like that just happens so often. And it is just, I think it's that disconnect between your mind and your heart, essentially, your gut instinct, your logical
Yeah.
thinking brain.
And just women as like we're taught just generally like to not trust ourselves. Like someone always knows best, someone else knows best, like
Mm,
look outside for validation or the answer. And
mm,
I think men are not taught that as much as young men, like young boys, teenagers, men are like, do it yourself, you're self-reliant, you can do it, kind of a thing.
yeah.
And I just think girls are taught like, if you're not sure, then stay quiet. And so I think I was definitely taught like, don't talk, be quiet, be pleasant. No one wants to hear your
Mm,
opinions. And I think what that did for me was exactly like it disconnected me from my truth. And then it had me saying yes to a whole bunch of things that I thought would keep me safe. And I think like this is kind of what is leading me to one of the biggest things I get asked by men all the time is like, God, why do women always like not say what they mean, not mean what they say? Why is it so hard to understand what women really want? Like, why
yeah.
does it always seem to change and it's just
Mm,
confusing? And my answer to that, I've been really thinking about this for years now, and it shifts, it's nuanced, but the general sense is that there's a disconnect between what she really wants and what she thinks she wants, and
what
she's
the world
going
has
with
told her
what
she's
she
supposed to want.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
she's telling you the what she thinks she wants, and she's
Yeah.
ignoring what she really wants, and it ends up in a big mess.
Yeah, I've come to that conclusion on my own, with definitely not any kind of tangible, evidence other than just my experience, but that's exactly what I've seen. And that's how I coach men. Hey, yeah, she's gonna say that she wants all these things, but it doesn't mean you don't give them to her, of course. Now you listen to her when you communicate, you do all these things. But you have to leave sort of some space for the idea that sometimes she doesn't know what she wants, and that's okay. And you have to be able to have the strength to go, okay, what she says she wants right now from me, might make her happy for the next 6 days, but in 6 months, she's probably not going to be attracted to me anymore. We won't be together anymore. So I'm okay with disappointing her right now, knowing that I've got some perspective here and I'm going to try to lead this relationship and help her by, saying, all right, yeah, you want me to cry and be very vulnerable or whatever it might be. But I know that ultimately in her forebrain, she wants that. But in her midbrain and her gut, her genetically, she's going to be, man, I kind of
Totally.
want to protect her. And this guy's all he does is complain
Totally.
about how he can't handle his job, and you know what I mean. So that's again, that's how I coach it. Sometimes she's going to say she wants a thing, and you got to know she doesn't really want it. That sounds so terrible. It makes it seem like like she's your pet or something, but that's not how I mean it at all. Like, are you able to
Yeah.
decode that and translate that and kind of make it make
Yeah.
sense? What I'm saying.
Heck yeah. Today, this morning, I had like a really great thought that was very clear to me. So I do a lot of like, what is my feminine brain thinking and what is my masculine brain thinking?
Ooh, this is
And
good.
yeah, I'm working on my movement, Venus and Mars. I'm doing my workshops. I'm really building up this movement around like teaching women how to understand men, helping men see women, this just finding compassion and bridging the gap. I also have a day job right now.
Hmm.
And it's great and it's super stabilizing and I love it and it's great. There are moments where I'm just like, like I don't want to do this today because I don't feel like it or I'm annoyed or whatever. And it's just frustrating and I want to be focused on my other stuff. I want to quit, right? I want
Mm,
to quit.
sure,
That's a
sure.
feminine thing. I want this now. It feels really real right now, my emotions right now.
Hmm.
Then I allow myself to feel that, throw my little personal little baby Anya temper tantrum inside my head,
Sure.
sometimes out loud,
Hmm.
in the privacy of my home. And then I go, what's the masculine perspective here? Okay, what are masculine virtues? Okay, patience, containment, holding. And then I speak to myself as if like God or my dad were telling me this.
Hmm.
And I
Excellent.
speak to myself and I say, hey, you know you like this stability.
Hmm.
You see where you're going and I believe in you. You're going to get to the place where you're not working at this job anymore. I see it. I believe in you, but that time has not come yet. So we're going to maintain this status quo and we're going to be really patient because it's actually providing us with like all these benefits. And then let me list out all 7 benefits. And then
Hmm.
my feminine brain is like, oh, yeah, that's true. Huh. Okay. And then that's how we like move through the moment.
Anya, you don't need no man. You have one living in your head. Good for you.
I
No,
do
that's
need a
great.
man. Yes.
I know. I say that all the time, and I
Yeah.
recorded a show a few weeks ago that specifically talking about how to any man who might be, commitment phobic or has been burnt before, or for whatever reason, is kind of soured on women. I specifically listed off 9 good, solid reasons why your life is going to definitely be better with a woman in it. No matter what your experiences have been. I don't,
Yeah.
I care who says what to you or what the world uh, tells you. Uh,
Yeah.
we're supposed to be together. I mean, you're not supposed to be by
Yeah.
yourself. You're better with someone else there, with a good partner pushing you. Every time I read a biography of anyone successful, male or female, they're not
Ooh.
single. Not single.
I just finished watching the one of the Winston Churchill documentaries. Have you
Excellent.
seen
No, I haven't
that?
gotten to him yet. I've been on like U.S. presidents, but keep telling me about it.
Oh my gosh. So I freaking love him and the way he talks about his wife Clementine. And
Okay.
there's
Great
this
name.
really, there's a couple funny stories, but I do recall an interview that I heard that they asked him what's his secret to his power and his success. And he says,
Mhm.
I love my wife. I got married. I don't chase women. I focus my life on my leadership because I love my wife and I have a great relationship.
Mm, it's great stuff.
And I love that. And there's like a fun little like anecdote. Actually, this is like my mom told me this story from like a Soviet joke because like I'm from originally from the Soviet Union, and so she told me this like joke that was always rolling through the Soviet Union back when she was a kid, which was Winston Churchill and his wife Clementine were walking down the street in London at a certain point, and they came across this man who it turned out was like cleaning something or sweeping something, and it turns out that Clementine had known him because she actually did find herself in like a more lower socioeconomic place when she was a kid before she like
Okay.
came out. Anyway, went into high society and met Winston
Sure.
Churchill at a dinner. So uh she knew him, and they had like a little bit of like a puppy love when they were kids, this man. And
Okay.
Winston Churchill, after they leave him, they keep walking. Winston says, man, what would your life have been like if you had married him?
Mm.
And she goes, if I had married him, he would have
He would
become the
be
prime
you.
minister.
Yeah, great answer and very accurate. You know,
Yeah.
I'm reading
Yeah.
about Ulysses Grant right now. It's the same thing. They do a lot of describing of his wife, and she's just a constant, you know, not pushing him like a dick, but really, hey, no, I believe in you. You got this. Like
Invitation.
always supporting, always pushing, and that's absolutely the way it should be. I think that's a power that women don't realize they have. It's a thing that is it's kind of lost to antiquity, that ability to, I mean, you more than we can make a man successful. And I think that story right there really illustrates it.
I love that. Speaking on this, I've been thinking about this for a little while too. The way that we are able to push men into greatness is by expressing our statements of need
Okay,
as
what's
opposed
that?
to as opposed to criticism. So I think a
Yeah,
lot of women
criticism's
get
always bad. You
criticism is really bad. So women get caught up in criticism because that's just what their mothers did and their grandmothers did, and that's what they saw at home, and things weren't changing, and so they didn't know what to do.
hmm
And also, the reason women criticize is because they're blocking themselves from vulnerability, and they're afraid
Okay.
to actually express what's deeply in their heart because they're afraid to look weak, because there's already an imbalance in polarity there. So if they believe that if they look weak, then they're going to be alone.
Okay.
He's not going to step up.
Oh, okay. More to keep talking about that. This is the kind of thing where my listeners are just going to go nuts for it. They're hanging on every word right now.
Love that. So that's what women are feeling. So when they criticize, it's because that's all they know to do. They haven't yet been able to unlock the other way to do it. And the other way
Okay.
to do it is by declaring a statement of need. So it's a really great example. I'll paint a little picture for everybody listening. I actually was helping a couple through a moment a couple weeks ago, and what ended up happening was there's two kids. The dad came home from work. He had promised the kids he would take them to the movies before.
Okay.
Okay. Comes home from work. He's barely making it home. He gets home. He's like, I just can't do it. I have a project I have to finish. I have a deadline. I can't do it. He apologizes to the kids, hugs them. They say, it's okay. Then tells the wife, and then he like leaves to go work on his project.
hmm
So as the woman in this moment, there are two options that a woman has. One is to do the criticism thing that
hmm
every woman does all the time because that's all they have access to. Criticism sounds like you're always late, you're so selfish, you don't care about us, you're an asshole, all that.
Right.
And then what I teach women to do is realize that's not what is bothering you. There's something beneath the
There it
frustration.
is. That's the thing I was hoping you were going to get to. Let's go.
There's something beneath the frustration. What is it beneath the frustration? What is it? And then I have women answer this. And if they could only share this with their husbands, things would change immensely. And this clarity, the statement of need is, I am so disappointed. I feel
Mm.
so rejected. I feel like you were so out of integrity and it breaks my heart. And
Then it's about
I
her and not about him.
yeah, like it breaks my heart because I really want you to be a man of his word. And you really broke your word today to me, to our kids. And I'm deeply, deeply hurt. And I feel abandoned and I feel alone. I feel
Okay,
like
so
you're
then
not even here. Yeah.
if I'm hearing this correctly, she's afraid to say it that way because
Yeah.
if she does, then she appears weak. And what's the like worst fear that comes with that? What happens as a result of that in her mind?
He doesn't want to step up and she ends up being alone.
Okay.
He doesn't actually want to step up and he ends up being alone and she ends up being alone. And that is scarier to her than the breadcrumbs experience that she's having by being critical.
Right. Yeah, so she'd rather crack that whip because at least she feels like she's got some power. And I know I can tell you this, that at least from a male perspective, you anger is like the only acceptable negative emotion for a man to show, right?
Totally.
It doesn't
Totally.
matter what it is, disappointment, hurt, anxiety. you
Totally.
express it outwardly as anger, and maybe there's a component of that going on with a woman in that
Yeah.
situation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you know what? When you I've had this experience when I speak to a man like that, he drops everything
Oh
he's
yeah, for
doing
sure.
and
Yeah.
he just like steps into the moment and into the situation. And if he doesn't, then that's on him. That just
Mhm.
demonstrates the kind of man he is. But usually, I know a lot of good men, and most men are wonderful, and most men are good men. They will drop everything
Hmm.
to tend to that moment because their
For
entire
sure.
life's purpose is to make a woman feel
Yep.
fulfilled and satisfied.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah, from a male perspective, I can tell you I've experienced them both. And first of all, when you're critical, it's confrontational. And men only know one way to handle confrontation, and that's to fight. I mean, to run away, I suppose, is one of them, but that's the
Yeah.
least masculine of the two, supposedly,
Yeah.
or traditionally. So you're gonna have a fight. Now you got two people who are pissed off, and then you're in trouble there. Whereas you can be attacking as a woman, and that's going to push him away or create more attack. Or you can sit back and actually experience your feelings and let him come into them and give you
Yeah.
give you a hand. There's similar to that. I can't remember who I was speaking with. I get to speak
Yeah.
with so many great people like you. Um, he was telling me he was talking about the idea of meeting someone where they are.
Mm,
This is a topic that I've kind of been researching on the side just for myself. And what that means is this. So in that situation, if we were talking about how if a boy comes home and he's being bullied, how a man's going to handle that differently than a
mm.
woman.
Oh
So a
yeah.
woman's going to want to protect, support, be warm, caring. Oh, it's going to be okay. Go down and blame the principal and do all that stuff. Whereas a man is going to want to teach the son how to fight. And the woman's never going to understand that on a man's, man's going to be like, well, I know this is what I want to do, what I have to do, so I'm going to do it. But in the interest of making those bridges that we're talking about, you
Yeah.
meet her where she is. She's in a position at that point of trying of feeling his feelings, being empathetic towards the boy. So she's in her feelings at that point. So then you have to come in and meet her in her feelings, and you do it like this. You say, I was in the spot where he was in fourth grade, and I had a bully. And it made me feel very rejected. It made me feel very alone. It made me feel like I was never going to have any friends, or like explain the feelings behind the boy and then connect it to, oh, and so that's why I'm going to teach him how and when to commit to violence. So you meet some,
Yeah.
that's that bridge that we're talking about where I know I have to do what I have to do, but it's also very much my responsibility to teach you, my partner, why I'm doing it, right?
Totally.
And it's the same thing, I think, from the female perspective, back to your example.
Yeah.
I know what needs to happen here, and you have I guess, the luxury in that situation of when he comes home and he's not going to take him to the movies or whatever it is, of seeing the long-term effects of that. You have some perspective. He
Yeah.
doesn't. He's in the moment right there, and I got to get this work done, and that's that. And he doesn't see that perspective. You have the luxury of that perspective, so you've got to meet him. You got to let him know what that is, draw him into it. It's so
Yeah.
simple what you're talking about, but I think you're right. A lot of women don't do that.
It seems simple. It really does seem simple. That's the magic of the feminine, right? Like we're the visionaries, we're the questioners, we're the ones that can say like, "Hey, like what's the most important thing to you? Is it a project or is it being a great dad?"
Yeah.
And um not in a way that devalues or diminishes all the work that he does
Yeah,
because
not
that's
passive aggressive.
yeah, that's the last thing that I want ever to happen. And I think that that's one of the most important things that women can do too for men is to really acknowledge them when they're working and to really allow them to be working without interruption during the times when they laid it out. And I think
Hmm.
that's why I love masculine thinking so much. When a man tells me things, all right, from this time to this time, I'm doing this. From this to this, I'm doing this. Then it's like, cool, I got it. But
Yeah.
when the rest of the time you're also not available, then I
Hmm.
don't trust you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you don't have your expectations are being crushed. His
Yeah.
old poem where he keeps saying, "Good fences make good neighbors," and really, what that statement means is good expectations make good relationships. If you know
Yeah.
what to expect, things are going to go well. I know I'm terrible at that. If we're supposed to do X, Y, Z, and it's going to end at a certain time and it doesn't, I don't
Yeah.
like that. I mean,
Yeah,
we're at your family's. When I was dating this girl for a long time, we'd be hanging out with her family. Yeah, we'll be getting out of there about 6 or 7. But when it's 10 o'clock and we're still there, I'm just like, I wasn't prepared for this. You know what I mean? Like I can
totally,
adapt as best as I can, but like you
totally.
said, it makes you lose some trust.
Totally. And back to what you were saying about the kid being bullied at school, I think there are a couple of fundamental things to note there. Like if we look to evolutionary psychology, if we look to indigenous tribes and just the way that humans have been doing life long before us here in the
Way, way
fun,
before. Yep.
comfortable West, they
Yep.
were really clear that the boy really belongs to the mother up until puberty.
Yeah, I
Like
would tell you 10, 11, 12.
10, 11, 12. That's it. And then afterwards, the boy belongs to the father. And if you don't allow that switch to happen, you will create a big boy in a man's body that
Oh,
is
absolutely.
non-committal and a big Peter Pan and just like
Hmm.
unable to take responsibility for life. And it's wild that women can't foresee that for their sons and for their future grandchildren and for the women that they will marry, you know?
Yeah, and so that is why I wrote this book, Reviving Masculinity. It
Woo!
is it is designed for that young man who, I can quote numbers at you like crazy. I do it all the time, but so many boys are raised by single mothers, and then they
Yeah.
go to a school district that's, 80%-ish female.
Yep.
And boys learn to be men socially. Boys learn to be dads, especially socially.
Yeah.
Girls become women and mothers biologically. Most of those things are hormonal. You know what to do with that baby. It's just there, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it helps. It certainly helps to have a role model. But for
Yeah.
boys specifically, as you're saying, it needs to be a role model thing. And like you said, it's crazy the irony. It's the same single moms who are complaining there are no good men in the world. Meanwhile, their 30-year-old son lives in the basement. He's got no tools. He's got no idea how to be a man.
Yeah.
And it's just a sad thing. And they're dooming themselves and they're dooming the next generation too. Um,
Totally.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
It's tough. I think about this too also in the West. Like, so I originally come from Azerbaijan. Like my grandparents were all teachers, like in the Soviet Union, with all of its faults. There
My
were some
parents were
good
teachers
things.
too. That's
Oh, they
cool.
were
Yeah, both of
amazing.
them. Yeah.
That's so great. There were so many male teachers there, right?
Hmm.
Like it was pretty much 50-50, right? Like the
No
women
kidding.
taught humanities and literature and
Sure.
language, and the men
Right.
taught science and math and wood
Right.
shop and all that
Sure.
stuff.
Sure.
And
PE.
it was PE, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think by not pedestalizing being a teacher in this country,
Mm-hmm.
we really like deter men from wanting to be teachers. And I think that, not every man has the luxury of like doing a $10,000 like man's initiation course in the woods
Right.
or,
Right.
having all this life coaching and all these wonderful things that a lot of us have the luxury to do. But what about like the blue collar guy? Like, how can
Sure.
we help him? And I think,
There's a lot more of them.
yeah, there's a lot more of them. And I like, that's my love. Like, that's my heart sings around like trying to find some solutions for these bigger problems. And if we could find a way to get their kids taught by men when they're at
Mm.
work,
Right.
that would be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the decline here in the West as things have improved technologically, economically, however you want to define it. I've watched how that maleness has gone away. I would take it back to the Industrial Revolution, so late 1800s. Before
Yeah.
that, we were primarily an agrarian society, and you got, boys as soon as they were physically able for
Yeah.
anything, 6, 7 years
Totally.
old, they were out working with dad. I mean, not like getting busted in the back with a whip or anything,
Yeah.
but out hanging out with dad, right? Watching dad do dad things and learning
Mm,
how to be a man. I mean, from the time they woke up till the time they went to bed. And then, somewhere in the mid-century, 40s, 50s, 60s. Now dad's going away from the house every day. He's going to a job, and now he's with mom a lot more. And he still has dad in the evening, but he was at work. He was at school with a female teacher all day, and he still has dad on the weekends. But now, we're incentivizing single motherhood so much financially through the systems of our social work systems here in the U.S. And now dad's maybe not around at all, maybe every other weekend and that maleness is just going away. It's devastating. I don't want to turn this into a masculinity thing. I talk about that crap all the time, but curious
No.
how that looks from your end. I mean, how's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
fleshing out?
I love that. I was just gonna say, let me add the female aspect to
Please
this.
do. Please do.
Biggest misconception ever is that women, just like in agrarian societies, sat around doing nothing and then
Yeah.
finally made their way into these like, suburban homes in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and were doing nothing. Women
Right.
have been working side
Working their
by
asses off.
side with
Yeah.
men up
Yep.
until the men went off to work
Used to
because
cut all the firewood of all things, which is like
yeah,
one of my
yeah.
quote stereotypical masculine duties used to be women used to do that. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, it's wild. It's just a truth. Like unless you were the top tier, tiny little percentage, upper echelon, upper class, like you were a duke or a duchess, you were just a regular
Hmm.
person. And the
Hmm.
economic unit of the society was centered around the household. And so
Hmm.
while the man was outside doing more of the hard labor, the woman was sewing, washing,
Yeah.
cooking,
My
cutting
hand. Yeah.
firewood by
Yep.
hand, everything. 14, 16 hours a day. And on top of that, she was um, a mother. And on top
Yeah.
of that,
Yeah.
she was a nurturer and a caretaker. And so when you ask, okay, why did the men go off to work? Well, because it was the honorable thing to do. When factories became life and men
You
needed to
make way more
leave,
money. Yeah.
who's going to go? The women? The
Yep.
women that
Yep.
have their periods and their
Yeah.
children?
Yeah.
No.
That's not gonna
so
happen.
so yeah, so for me, I'm just like, that's such a big misconception around feminism. And so feminism really, in my opinion, doesn't matter until we're talking about the 40s, 50s, 60s, right? When
I would
the
agree.
men have been away for a few decades now, and now the
Hmm.
women are feeling useless,
Yeah.
right?
And because of the things, well, because of lots of reasons, but due to those economic factors, improvements, technology, now that homework, the washing machine is automatic. You've got a
Exactly.
refrigerator. A lot of things are much easier. You got
Exactly.
disposable diapers. You got all these things that make that home life much more easy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
get that. I get that idea. And I would tell you this too. I'm curious what your thoughts are on
Yeah.
this, that the need for each other was a much stronger factor. You couldn't have a family without a man and a woman. You couldn't
Yeah.
have do that. You couldn't have a unit. Like there were no single moms out on the prairie, like this you
Totally.
had to have each other. And
Yeah.
I've always been it's been my idea, and I've maybe some you know uh, commitment bias here, but I think that uh, the more you need somebody, the better it is, in a
Yep.
relationship. It's a
Yep.
great idea that, oh, I don't need them. I just want them. I can do everything by myself and I just go to them for fun. I think that's a great idea, but that lends itself to kind of throwaway people, right? Whereas if you're woven in, you can't do it without them. Well, now you got to make it work. You know what I mean? And I think that's probably a big reason why marriages lasted longer. That need aspect, I couldn't do what you do. You couldn't do
Totally.
what I do. We got to have each other. We got to have each other.
Totally. No, for sure, for sure. I think that I think there are multiple levels to this. And I think we have to really take into consideration where we're at. It's 2023. People back then were surviving.
Mhm.
There were a lot of matches that happened based solely on contract or like compatibility. And there
Sure.
wasn't big love there. And there wasn't even, a lot of tenderness and devotion there. It was very dry, and that's sad to
Functional.
me
Yeah,
and
it
for
is.
a
Yeah.
lot of people. But they had to do it that way. I get it.
Mhm.
Today we have different options, but I think there are still two different layers to our personalities that I think are important to keep in mind. At the personality level, like I am Anya, like you are Travis, you have all of these wonderful qualities, all of these great things that you do and that you are, and all of that. And I have the same. And
Of
I,
course.
am good on my own. Whoever
Hmm.
comes and goes, that's okay. But when it comes to intimate relationship, we've got to drop it down to the polarity level. We've got to open ourselves up to allowing each other to fill needs that we're deeply craving and yearning that come from our like ancestral roots.
Absolutely.
So I think that's kind of where maybe
Yeah.
we can do this in a healthier way that is kind of based around more spirituality, I guess, and devotion and
Hmm.
tenderness that is not so contractual.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about. It makes me equally parts excited for meeting the right person one day and disappointed she's
Yeah.
not here yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah, it's a pride thing, I think. There are, like I said earlier, I'll go back to what I started with. I know that I need to be my best. I need a woman there. I'm always trying to encourage men the same thing. Like, hey,
Totally.
you're shorting yourself if you don't allow yourself this in your life. Okay, yeah, it's going to come with some
Mm.
negatives, just like anything else. You know, I always, men seem to understand trucks, so I talk
Oh
about
yeah,
trucks.
talk about trucks. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So like, you got two choices here, man. You can have a brand new truck that does everything you need it to do, and you're going to make a payment on it, or you can have an old beat up piece of crap that you're going to have to work on all the time. It's probably going to let you down at times that you don't need it. Side of the road when it's cold out.
Yeah.
Well, good for you. You don't have a payment. You know what I mean? And I think that's what you are when you're on your own. You're the old broken down truck. You don't know what your
Yeah.
problems are going to be because you don't have that mirror there. I always say that your partner is a mirror that you
Yeah.
can see things that you couldn't see on your own, right?
It's it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
It's transformational. I actually asked what I ask a lot of the men that I know in my world and also on my podcast, like, what's your favorite thing about women?
good.
And this one man recently said to me, a woman is my mirror. She
Mm,
will she will like literally point out all my blind spots. She will be
mm-hmm.
the one to help me get to a great place. But if she's broken, she
Mm.
will scratch me and it will
Ooh,
hurt.
this metaphor keeps
It
getting
was
better.
like, ooh, that metaphor. It was like that metaphor.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
so
good.
that's I think it's really big. I think it's really big. I think we have a lot of broken women in the world that have been told lies about
Mhm.
their power and who they are and what they need to do to find validation and it's not really working for us these days.
I would tell you that we have a lot of maybe broken's the wrong term for men, but certainly ill-equipped.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't have the tools, don't really understand what it is they're supposed to be doing. I think everyone needs a purpose, but men in particular, you've got to have a thing that is bigger than you, or at least outside of you, that is
yeah.
your focus. It's the thing that gets you up every day. It's the thing that makes you want to do things well. And it can't just be your own, sense of quality or something like that. You've got to have something outside of you that provides both some extra accountability and that mirror that we're talking about. And those aren't traits that are taught. I mean, men aren't taught those things anymore, and it sucks.
You know, they're not taught those things. There are no fathers in the home. I think
Hmm.
there's another thing that's important to note. Again, speaking of 2023, so Chris Williamson, you know him from Modern Wisdom.
Oh, I don't, but I'm gonna
Okay.
look him up now.
Yeah, I listen to him a lot. I really value his perspective and his curiosity. He has been playing around with this thing called the male sedation hypothesis. This is like
Hmm.
a Chris Williamson original, um, talking about how before technology, um, if a man is purposeless or he's doesn't have tools or there's something like he's missing, he
Hmm.
has this like fire, this urge in him to get out and do something. Okay, so he like
Yeah.
figures it out. He like maybe even causes some havoc, right?
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say it usually comes out in the wrong way, but keep going.
comes out in the wrong way. So there's actually like another. This is an evolutionary psychology term. It's called the young male hypothesis. It's that when there aren't enough. This is like in tribal times. When there aren't enough female partners for all the men in a tribe, the young men, they go crazy. They knock down granny. They like spray paint. They just do crazy things. They just are trying to get out their aggression, and their testosterone levels are quite high.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Chris Williamson is talking about how there are more sexless men than ever before right now.
Oh, it keeps getting worse.
61% of young men are not looking for short or long-term relationships. They're leaving the market.
Hmm.
Men are not having sex. So if we were living in old times, there should be a lot more violence and aggression and terror in our world, but there isn't. What's going on? And he says the
It's gonna
male
tell you. I think I
sedation
know the answer. I want to hear what
hypothesis.
he says. Yeah, I want to
Yeah,
hear
it's
this.
the male sedation hypothesis, a mixture of porn and video games and technology and social media, these three, the trifecta: porn, video games, social media, to where these things give like a cue, like a little cue of sex, right?
Hmm.
Porn gives like a little like, oh, it's not the real thing, but it's good enough. So it
It's methadone.
masturbation,
It's methadone.
right?
Yeah.
So then the testosterone levels drop and the dopamine and the testosterone. And so it
Hmm.
sedates men to the point where they're not getting up to go crazy to figure shit
Hmm.
out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, I think that men would be very different if boobs weren't so easy to see. You know what I mean?
Well, he was saying like it's okay right now because we're in peace times, but if
Mhm.
like an alien invasion came into the world, the best thing you could do is shut off all social media, all porn, all video games because men would actually then get up and have to utilize their aggression.
Man, I hope that's the case. I've had this conversation before about what it's going to take. Um, and I look at just
Yeah.
from a different perspective, just the division. We talked about the division in our country,
Yeah.
and what's gonna heal that. And I think about times just in my lifetime where we've been more unified as a country, and it's always when there's a presence of an outside threat. I mean,
Totally.
growing up for me in the 80s, it was you guys. It was it was the Soviet Union, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we
totally.
were all unified because we
Yeah.
had a common foe. After
Yeah.
9/11, I think it was the same way. I mean,
Yeah.
people really came together. Pearl Harbor would have been, I wasn't alive then, but doing my research on that, same thing. We
Yeah.
just we are minus a foe,
A
and
foe.
and yeah, and humans are built naturally to handle adversity. We got to think about it. Like, who did we come from? Did we come from the people who were afraid of conflict? No, those people died. We came from the
Yeah.
people who were able to step up and fight. That's who we're genetic. That's our genetic lineage. We came from the winners of the battles.
Yeah.
So we're built for that. And sadly, what's happening, instead of creating healthy challenges to feed that need for adversity, like
Yeah.
like building things, working out, being in
Totally.
a healthy relationship, people are choosing things to burn down. They're choosing to,
Totally.
get on the social media, do these things and tear people down and cancel people and hate and be angry, and they're creating adversity that isn't healthy, and they're choosing, their foe is whichever political half of the country they disagree with. And that's just
Totally.
it's fake. It's something that's built by the media. It's something that's built by those three things that you're talking about. Yeah, and if those
Yeah.
weren't there, and or an alien invasion. Funny you mentioned that. I say that all the time. Oh, if we got invaded by aliens, to tell you what, there wouldn't be any Democrats and Republicans anymore. You know what I
That's
mean?
true.
Or China or North Korea or anything like that. If there actually was some
True.
a real physical threat, I think
True.
people would get it together pretty quickly. But they'd still be, I think about our male population, they'd still be a bunch of overweight idiots looking at their phone trying to figure out why it's not working. What's really going on?
Yeah.
That's what I worry about. I always say,
It,
if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. Go ahead.
it's really worrisome, right? Because I do believe that, if everyone was to take it upon themselves to become like the best version of themselves, would have such a beautiful opportunity at the things that they want, the things that they desire. And
Yeah.
I think there were a lot of things at play like in the 50s that are great to learn from and to kind of bring back in a way. And I'm not
Mm.
interested in going back to those times. I think there was a lot of oppression and people weren't able to kind of be themselves. But I
I
think one
agree.
of the things I'm talking about is I don't know, not everybody agrees with this.
Say it.
People might be frustrated by this, but casual sex and the
Yeah.
ease in which women
Yeah.
are having sex with men is not good for men and it's not
No
good for women.
consequences. Yeah,
They're
there's no
super
consequence there.
big.
Women have always been the controllers of the gate, right? Like, you control sex. I would tell you that
Really.
men probably control relationships at this point, but
Sure.
women certainly control the sex. And
Sure.
both of those things are, I think, handled very willy-nilly. There should be they should be more serious affairs.
Absolutely. We need to like we just need to regroup like women as a whole. Like there's this, okay. Oh, I've been playing with this. Okay. I'm going to share this with you for the first time. I've been playing with
Okay.
this hypothesis. I'm going to name it. I'm calling it like the courtesan hypothesis. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So, why is female empowerment linked to free sexuality? Like, why? Why,
Mm,
why, why?
yeah.
Well, if you think
You're right.
about the
People take it for
1600s,
granted, but why? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, if you think about the 1600s, 1700s, like you imagine the world, the time of contractual marriage, right?
Hmm.
Parents agreeing on who's going to get married, so it like furthers their family name.
Hmm.
You had a lot of like elite prostitutes, right? You had cheaper prostitutes, but you also had courtesans. Okay. You
Okay.
had these
Okay.
women who they couldn't get a good marriage because they weren't wealthy, and they didn't want to become a nun. Those are the two
Okay.
options you had if you
For a
couldn't, like,
woman. Yeah.
for a woman. So you become this courtesan and you use your sexuality and your prowess and your femininity and your desire to appease men, to even, like, at this time the courtesans had more power than the wives. The wives were mute, docile women
Right.
pushed away from society in that way, whereas the courtesans were like in the ears of these
In their
men,
ears. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yep.
like planning warfare, and just like
Mm-hmm.
there
Mm-hmm.
is so much power. They could do whatever they want. They could own property, they could travel, they could do anything. And so there's this idea that I think is lingered from there, that being a wife is asexual, but being a courtesan is
Highly sexual.
hypersexual,
Yeah.
and you want to be hypersexual. It's a big misconception, the Madonna whore complex, like
Mm-hmm.
you're
Mm-hmm.
either a whore or you're a Madonna. And I think that has translated today to where sex doesn't matter, have sex like a man, wear whatever you want, own your, flaunt your sexuality, and that's going to give you power. Whereas I think the exact opposite is true.
Okay. Now I agree with you, but I want to hear you back that up. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me why the opposite is true.
Because I believe that sex is sacred. I think it's the best thing we've got on this planet, right? It is like when
And it's
two
free.
people, yeah, when two people unite in sex that is loving and devoted and deep, it is
Mm-hmm.
transcendent, it is transformational, it is your connection to God. And
Yeah,
I
that's a big
think,
deal.
yeah, and that's a big, huge deal. I also think that men are inspired by the radiance of women.
Oh my God, yes.
And so, like, if a man can't be aroused by a woman's smile, then we have a problem in our society.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And these days, the only people aroused by a woman's smile are over the age of 60.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really believe that if women could just like get a hold of their self worth
Collectively.
collectively, and we could just like remember that slut shaming was something that women did because it was actually really good for men. If you slut shame women
Yeah.
back in the day, then like
Hmm.
it makes certain that less and less women are going to like give of their
Be sluts.
sexuality
Yeah.
freely. And
Yeah.
then that means you have more men wanting to get married.
Yeah. Because that's the only way to access.
Yeah.
And you want it. We all want it.
Yeah. So nowadays, like I was talking to a couple friends, I was like, you know, how do we date, right? We have all these issues with the apps, and the apps are the worst thing ever for us. So what do we
They
do?
are
And
pretty bad.
we were talking about, oh my God, wouldn't it be great if we started this movement, like friends setting up friends again? That's how people used to date.
It's the best way to find people from what I hear.
Totally. But then I was like, okay, I know a couple guys like here in Dallas at the gym, just like in my life and my social circles. And
Hmm.
I started thinking about some of them. And I was like, oh, if I went up to a couple of them and I was like, hey, I have this really amazing girl that I think you would like. Can I introduce you guys? Young guy, 28, maybe 32 even, right?
Sure. Sure.
He would say, "Oh, I'm good. I'm not interested right now."
Because
And
he's
my
got unlimited access on the apps.
he's got unlimited sexual access, so he's
Yeah.
not interested in a relationship. And maybe he'll come to some transcendent place in his self-development journey. Cool. Maybe
Hmm.
not. The point is if we didn't have this problem, more men would want to be in relationships.
Yeah, I see that all the time. I mean, I see it all the time. Man, just they don't, I'm
Yeah.
just sad. I wish I could explain it better than that. I
But
see it constantly.
but in order to cope with the heartbreak of this, women
Hmm.
are doing the same thing.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not healthy. I keep reading that the unhappiest group demographic is women over 40 who are single. And you hear women who are over 40 and single just railing that that's not true. But there's also, I think, a dynamic among you women where let me present it to you this way.
Okay.
Men bond by insulting each other. but they don't
Yeah,
really mean it. They don't really mean it though, right? I mean,
totally.
that's just how it
Yes.
works. Women bond by complimenting each other, but they don't really mean it. So
Yeah,
I
I've
think
heard this
that
one.
this happens all the time where, it's the you go girl complex, right? Where you're 40 and single and you got a great career, and the married women around her are just going to talk about how, oh, it's so awesome. You have this great life. You've got all this freedom. You can have sex with anybody you want. You got your own money. That must be so nice. It's so great. So they're just having that support heaped on them. And, I wonder if they're really feeling it. I get the same thing. All of my friends are married, great family men, successful guys, really
Yeah,
good men. And, I hear it occasionally, dude, your life's so great. You don't have a boss. You don't have, like, you can go do whatever you want to. Isn't that so great? And I'm kind of going, I'd probably trade with you. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
I think it's a perception thing. It's like the Facebook complex, right? Where, everybody gets FOMO from watching Facebook because the only stuff people post on there is the best stuff. Nobody's posted on there, at least not in my circle, all the negatives about their lifestyle. It's a perception issue. It's not, I don't think it's reality. I don't know. What do you think?
Totally. Love it. Listen, I think the men that say like you don't have a boss or like she's the boss, like that's my biggest pet peeve ever. I think those are the people in those like old style relationships that like haven't transcended any sort of like old programming around ball and chain stuff, as opposed
Sure,
to what
sure.
I believe relationships are a transformational space to find the freedom of who you are and like
Mm,
build that and to
mm,
grow. And I I think people are just like checking boxes usually. They're not really
yeah,
in tune with what they desire and who they
yeah,
desire to be. And some people don't want relationships.
yeah.
Most people do.
Yeah, and then they'll lie to themselves and say that they don't. I'm reading some Joseph Campbell right now, and he talked about he goes into some pretty deep stuff. Anyway, one of his ideas is that, the idea of your better half or your two halves of one whole, or the whole idea of a marriage where you're combining, and he talks about different cultures where it really is that you have found the other half of yourself. You were divided at some point in a previous life, and you found that other half. And being married is actually becoming whole. What a romantic and beautiful idea, you know what I mean? And it's no different. We're dealing with someone without than it is, just like you described, where you were talking to God or your father, whoever what
Yeah.
was. There's always a conversation in my mind too, where there's two halves of me,
Yeah.
and we're negotiating something, whether it's my
Totally.
heart and my mind or however you want to say it. So why is it
Totally.
different if it's on the outside? You're probably already pretty good at that. I don't know. These are just the thoughts that go through
I
my head
love
as I go
that.
through my journey.
That's great. Yeah. The like inner world. Once you've got the inner world mastered, then you can kind of finally sink into that outer world.
Oh, it's such a big
And
deal.
I think it's a big deal. And I think that's why women and men like have this really hard time allowing the other to kind of come in and like fill in those spaces and to just like one of the biggest questions that Alison Armstrong, who I love, she's like kind of the
Yeah, big fan
OG,
too.
love
Hmm.
her, OG queen of advice for men and women. And she always is asking women, like, what are you gonna let a man do for you?
Yeah,
And this is like such a big question for women to answer because they don't need men to do much anymore. But it's like, what do you want a
you
man to
want,
do
yeah.
for you? And I think that's like a very big question. I think the same is true for men. Um, you know, I,
Very true for men. They can't even admit that there's something that they need. I mean, let alone
yeah,
let
it's,
somebody fill it.
yeah. And like, I think that's something like in my 20s, I was always missing from like connections with men where I just felt like I wasn't seen, you know? Like I wasn't seen of like for who I am and my unique way of feeling things and my, energy and my essence. And I was just like
Were you
not
being who you
seen
are?
for that. What?
Were you being who you are?
Yeah, yeah. In many instances, of course, I was in my on my healing journey, but I guess I just mean to say that a lot of times, like the men wouldn't. What I'm getting at is that I felt that if they allowed the feminine to fly at full force, then it would make them feel weak. It would make them feel
Hmm.
out of control. It would make them feel like they didn't have a handle on life.
Was that a weaker, just a not a fully evolved man, or was that
Yeah,
just a misconception on your part? Okay, it was the former.
it was definitely the former. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We were all in our early 20s trying to
And yeah,
figure out
nobody's
life.
formed, right? Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, especially for men. I don't know if I had my shit together even remotely till probably mid 30s, you know?
yeah. So I think that's really interesting, like yeah, I think that's really important. I think the man and woman stuff, like when a man feels when a man can like really be present with a woman and can just like be, I know everybody talks about this, but it's just like so important because people are still not doing it. I'm still walking down the street and I'm still seeing 25-year-olds looking down at their phones.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when men can just like be present and just like be there and like look, it's so grounding for everybody.
Yeah, I had a conversation just last night actually about that very thing. I think that the phone and all these other distractions that you're in all day. I'm sitting at a restaurant, it's pretty full. We're looking around and I see all these people and they're, half of them are on their phones and but regardless of what it is, none of them are really interacting like you and I are, right? I know that we're not
Yeah.
in the same room, which would add a whole different
Yeah.
volume, right? But I'm very in tune with what you're saying. You seem to be very listening to what I'm saying. And I watch these social interactions going on around me, and that's not happening. I mean, there's probably
Totally.
50 people in the place. And I think I hypothesized at that moment that it's that they spend so much time here that they have lost the ability to really value this interpersonal communication. I can't tell you how many
Totally.
times I've talked to someone who's in their early 20s and you can tell just by the look on their face that they can't really gauge facial expressions that well. It's almost like an autism, right? Like a learned autism. They can't understand body language that well. And it's just
Yeah.
because they haven't had the reps, they haven't had the contact.
My
Everything's been
heart
electronic.
breaks. My heart
Mine
breaks
too.
because what I know is happening in college campuses all over the country and in the world is young 19-year-old boys that can't read body language and that can't understand what's happening on a nuanced level and are watching porn and are repeating the stuff that they see. And they're really tragically hurting young girls
Mhm.
without meaning to.
Right. They're doing what they've been taught essentially,
Yeah.
and it is not effective.
And they've been taught, and the girls have been taught to not trust themselves, to not speak up about what feels however it feels, because
Mhm.
they've been watching the same stuff too. And they feel like it's
Yeah.
the right way to do things. And it really
Yeah.
breaks my heart that we're not taking the self esteem, like the mission of helping young people find self esteem, as seriously as we should be.
I would tell you that it's been I was a high school teacher myself for a long time. I don't remember if I told you that or not. But that was a big deal. The self-esteem movement actually started in the 70s, but everything was about not hurting kids' feelings. And she's in middle school when I was teaching, you couldn't fail classes. You could get F's in all of your classes and you'd still
Oh
be a ninth
no,
grader at the end of middle school. And you're just doing people a tremendous disservice. So
that's
in
not
the
self
name of
esteem.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
It was misnamed and very much misapplied, and it caused the opposite. It was ironically causing poorer self-esteem. Self-esteem comes from, and as far as I'm concerned, earning accomplishment, achieving, doing things like that, and actually
Totally.
taking some licks, being put on your ass, and then learning how to get back up. That's where self-esteem comes from. It's self-esteem. It's not external esteem. Okay, you gotta
Yeah.
earn it. You gotta do it yourself, and I don't see that happening at all anymore. Everything's about somebody's feelings. It's just a sad thing.
Yeah.
It's too bad. I wish I could. Um, kind of be the you remember the movie A Few Good Men with Tom
Yeah.
Cruise and Jack Nicholson, right? And he gives that famous speech, "You can't handle the truth." Jack Nicholson does at the end. I wish I could be that person for the world and say, you
Yeah.
know what? You need to toughen up a little bit. You need to experience some life. You'll be far happier if you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So, Venus and Mars podcast. How do we
Yes.
find it?
Yes. You can follow me on Instagram at Anya Shakh, ANYASHAKH. You can leave the link down below.
I will.
And my link is in the bio there. You can find it on Spotify or Apple. You can just type in Venus, ampersand Mars.
Okay.
And yeah.
We will I'll push as much as I can. I'll probably fade out the sound right here as I, mix it at the end. So,
Awesome.
um, yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. It was like I said, I really enjoyed our conversation. I thought we were able to connect on
Yes.
so many things. It's so rare that I get to talk to somebody I don't know, a lot of times it kind of ends up being an echo chamber where I'm talking to another guy who's researched the same stuff I have, and we're both saying, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
bro. Oh yeah, bro. Oh yeah, bro." And like you've seen it from a different angle, so it's really cool to be able to, you know, honestly share, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing. What are you seeing it?" And you're seeing it from the other side, and we're, that bridge thing is just really attractive to me. We
Me
need to do that.
too. It's so good. Men and women unite.
Yeah, no
Yes.
shit. No shit. Well, thanks again. I will
Cool.
hit you up on Instagram. I'm gonna get your address from you. I'm gonna send you a swag package. I'm gonna send you a small t-shirt.
Yeah.